Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Immersive Podcast. Today we have got a special guest, as always, David Secunda. He is a novelist, a playwright, an actor, a performance artist, and so much more. He's a true artist, and that's why he's on the show. Shout out to our affiliate sponsors, Galactic Federation of Light. Link is in the bio. They make clothing for light workers. They pay attention to the cloths that they use. They don't mix wool and linen. They are all about analyzing the frequency at which their clothing vibrates. They're even looking into photonically charging their clothing. If you use the code Tyler33 in the link below, add a hat to the cart, you get a free hat. You guys know, if you ever watch anything I've ever done, you usually see that I'm wearing a hat, which is ironic because I didn't ever wear a hat till I was about 30 years old. And also, of course, a shout out to Unified TV, Network for Truth. There's a lot on there that, of course, not everybody's gonna love everything, but just to name some names of some people who are on there: Bashar Channeling, everything from Stephen Greer, a lot of Billy Carson stuff, Jason Shurka. It's all on Unified TV. The link is in the bio of this video. It is a free trial. There's also a discounted price for the monthly price, and then you also get another discount if you do the yearly subscription, and you get access to all the live events for free. So just want to shout out to the people who have affiliated themselves and supported us thus far. David, how are you doing today?
Excellent. It's been an amazing couple of days that just passed.
Really? What's happened the past few days? You had a few good days? Anything awesome? You in the lottery?
Well, no, but maybe better because,
Okay.
my daughter and I have been working on a few one-person shows, writing them together, and Joy Lynn tours them. And so a couple of good things happened in the last few days. We got a Canada Council grant approved, and Cirque du Soleil is really interested in honoring Joy Lynn. So that's pretty good. So there are actually three people that Joy Lynn met, two of them independently in the last year or so, and they're all kind of coming together on this. So we're just hoping it works out.
That seems to be how things go. They come full circle, and it's all of a sudden, it seems so synchronous when things come full circle and the three people come together in an unexpected way or something like that.
Yeah.
But for anybody who is not familiar with our guest today, David, his daughter Joy Lynn Secunda is a performance artist as well. She's a very, very, very talented actress, and she does, I believe they're one-person shows. Is that correct? You guys work on them together and write, direct, and produce. But is she the lone performer in most of her shows? The routine, the morning act.
The two one-person shows. Joy Lynn's worked on several other plays where Joy Lynn gets hired and,
of course,
goes on tour and that type of thing. But since Joy Lynn graduated from a BFA in acting, we worked on these two shows. The first was The Moaning Yoni, and it's a satire of an ayahuasca ceremony. But most people don't know that because we don't say ayahuasca.
They don't say it.
There's a secret elixir that the main character attends.
Elixir of the gods.
And in the circle, they apply the elixir to their vaginas. It's in the Yoni healing circle. So because of the elixir, the main character, Zoe, goes on a psychedelic trip, revisits past parts of their life, begins to step into mindfulness. So it's a comedy and it's a satire of New Age healing. So that's with the shows that Joy Lynn and I collaborate on. That's one of the central themes, New Age healing.
So really, so I've read your book, Balancing Act, which was your first novel, correct?
Yes.
Great novel, by the way. It's available on Amazon. I will put the link in the bio. Lynn, her handle and such will also be in the bio of this video. But Balancing Act is David's first novel. His most recent novel is called Fluid. He's got it too, But I got an early copy here, which I was happy to receive. Thank you, David. I remember you sending it to me. must have been close to a year ago now. But
Yeah,
yes, of course, I've read the book, and it sounds like the way what you just described, what Joy Lynn you are working on, is actually kind of similar in theme to the themes explored in Balancing Act. Not entirely, but there's crossovers there.
totally true. That
Yeah. And I
Jordan,
love, and I wanted to add that yes, David did indeed say vaginas. And David while he looks like he's wearing a buttoned up shirt and just a regular, you know, Fox News watching guy. No, David is an artist, and read Balancing Act. It's quite exciting. It's very visceral, and that's that's what struck me about your work at first. It was almost a little bit Chuck Palahniuk esque at the beginning.
oh yeah,
Pieces of it, and I was like, wow, this because I've had conversations with you where you've told me things and about 15th century Scottish history and likened it to cryptocurrency. And they've been like valuable parables, just in our random conversations. Very intellectual, very educated, very logical, etc. And then, in your books, which I know the main character is kind of based around a fictional version of somebody like Joy Lynn, is at least what my interpretation
yeah.
was.
There's another the initial idea for Balancing Act that became from one of Jordan's best friends. And during the pandemic, who was also in the performing arts. During the pandemic, there was nothing for performing artists to do. Even
Right.
movies production were canceled. So we created this web series called Isolation Nation. So I should have sent you a link, but it's in my website. There's a link.
No worries. We'll get everything from you before this goes up. We're not live yet, so no worries.
Okay. Isolation Nation, our family worked on it. Jolene, just like in the Moaning Yoni and the routine, played several characters, and I directed it, and Jolene and I wrote it, and Linda, my wife, filmed it. So then Jordan edited it. So we put that together during the pandemic, but
That's
not
amazing.
everybody did that. So Jordan's friend was following a podcast by two Vancouver actors who people in Vancouver know them, but most people wouldn't have heard of them. But they put on a podcast, and one of Jordan's friends created 65 fake Gmail accounts and wrote them fan letters to these people from 65 different characters. And they thought they had a huge fan base.
Hey,
And
whatever you got to do.
person, I know her very, very well. And I was just wondering what kind of person would do this. So the initial idea for Balancing Act came from that idea. So in Balancing Act, I don't use fake Gmail accounts, it's fake Facebook accounts. That's where the idea is. So, but there's a little bit of Joyland in it. And
Just from our conversations, I mean, and by the way, for everybody who's listening, and David, I don't know Joy Lynn personally. I've just seen some of her promotional reels and things like that on Instagram and things that David's told me about what they've worked on. But yeah, I was just kind of guessing, and that would, everybody has their own interpretation when they read a book. I was curious in your thoughts on that. And
there is one scene that is totally from Joyland's life. And that's when do you remember?
There is some real stuff in there from Joy Lynn.
Yeah, when the first scene in the experimental forest. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So
Is that when she first?
The main character Ilona goes into the experimental forest, for a class and puts on a performance that's filmed.
Mm-hmm.
So that and the performance is about ayahuasca and the two.
I was going to say that was the first ayahuasca experience in the book, right?
Yeah. It's not it's not taking ayahuasca. It's having read about it and trying to express it artistically to your ecology class, which is held in the forest. So that's what happens in the scene. This comes from a few of the projects that I helped Jordan with in university, and one was about ayahuasca. And it was actually for the class, The Ecology of People and Places, which is the same class I use in the book. So it was actually True. And at the end of the scene, Joy Lynn did the performance, did another performance for the class, two performances. One was on the plant sisal, which this mask here is made out of. It's
I
a
was gonna ask eventually. I'm like, hey, so what's up with those cool,
so
awesome prop masks?
it's out to the here I'll just hold it up closer. It's apropos to the scene.
I can
So
see it really well.
same
And
class.
did you make that, or did you have a
Yes,
prop specialist? You
yeah,
did?
yeah. I'll just put it on quickly.
I know you're a multimedia. David's an artist in every way. That's why he's on the show. Like, you'd think he wrote a book. David embodies artists. As you can see, he's in his kitchen. It looks like a lot of people's kitchens, but he's also wearing a mask that he made. And he's got quite an interesting story and quite an interesting energy. Not
So
just interesting, but quite
they
pleasurable.
this
He's
is
a
sisal, which I dyed by hand a long time ago. So in all, and what actually happened is Jordan did a report on sisal for the class, and
brought back
got a mask
memories for him.
and did a dance for the class in the mask. So I transformed those events into the first ayahuasca mentioned in the book.
Okay. And I know we've at least talked about it because, I've talked about my experience with, usually refer to it as Mama Aya. Have you had personal experience with, the ceremonial plant medicine? Have you ever tried? You can say no comment, but is that something you've ever had personal experience with?
Yes, many times.
Excellent experience.
Well,
Has it been
it's
different every time? Yeah,
well,
but has it been healing for you, or
in general, it was the greatest experience of my life. It's it's wonderful. I mean, the first few times, well, the very first time after being in the experience for a while, maybe I should set the stage for what it's like. So there's a woman, doesn't like to have her real name publicized, Blue Thunder Woman, we call her. She holds the ceremony. So I didn't know her first. I got connected through a friend of Joy Lynn's. And
now is this in Canada? I know.
yeah, it was at the time she lived in Vancouver, but we
Yeah,
went into the country and there's a giant, very, very big house with a big living room. And the ceremony's
very.
there. There's about 12 participants and 2 helpers. And then Blue Thunder Woman who conducts the ceremony. And you go through 2 nights. So you take
Yeah,
around 9 or 10 at night, you take the ayahuasca. And then
yeah.
after about half an hour, you start feeling it. She sings and plays different musical instruments the whole night. And that, you purge. So before going into it, I thought, well, I was with my friend, I was driving, and he was in the ceremony too. And, I say, oh, man, you have to purge. I just don't really want to purge. So you
Right.
feel but then once you purge, it's the greatest thing in the world. And it's
I
really
can.
hard because some people I've thrown up when they're drunk. It's not like that at all.
Yeah, you'll think purge. I'm gonna get sick. I'm gonna throw up. I'm gonna what? I'm gonna expel
So
bodily fluids for, like,
when it
let's call it what it is.
when
But
it happens,
a
you're
purge is different.
hallucinating. So you're hallucinating and you're so aware because what ayahuasca does is the serotonin in your brain, when it stays in the synapse, you have a sense of well-being. And this is all working in microseconds. So what the ayahuasca, the Stereopsis caupi, that's the ingredient in the ayahuasca that keeps the serotonin in the synapses for a long time. So so the other thing, but you also need the source of dimethyltryptamine.
It's good because I thought, of course, the main psychoactive was the dimethyltryptamine, the DMT,
It's
and
psychoactive part. And,
something I'm very
and
familiar with is the 5-MeO DMT.
and serotonin
Real. 5-MeO DMT, the bufo toad with some
Yeah,
shaman. I've done that as well. Which of course is a shorter version of the
yeah,
ayahuasca trip. Similar themes and things, just much shorter.
yeah. It lasts the ceremony. Well, you start feeling it. If you take it at 9, start feeling it at 9:30, and by 4 or 5 in the morning, you're really starting to wind down most of the time. So I was talking about the purging, which is the most important part, because that's that's the spiritual part. So sometimes, some people purge once, and sometimes you purge many times, maybe 30 or 40 times during the night. It's
Might
very,
be whatever you need.
yeah, it's very exhausting, but um, you're, it, you have the feeling that you're connecting. Your sense of self totally disappears. You read that and it means something in an intellectual way, but in reality, when you experience it, the experience of the disappearance of the ego is something you can't say in words, but when you experience it, it's, very profound. So it's
Absolutely.
like
And
sensing,
I
sensing
can confirm. Yes, absolutely.
and,
So profound.
and differences between the senses, like hearing and sight, they start to disappear. It's the
People
sensing
use the,
is
the
kind
term
of
out of
now.
body, but it's like it's
Yeah,
more than that.
it's out of body. Those are all metaphors for it.
Right.
So, but the other one, so at the first time I did ayahuasca, the 2 nights, and in the beginning of the first night, I was asking myself, why did I do this to myself? It was because you feel like you have no control. But then the thing with ayahuasca is, and after a few ceremonies, you don't try. You just don't try. You just take it and it happens, and you don't try to control it. And then it doesn't really control you, because the ayahuasca is a teacher and it teaches you what you need to know. So when you just know with that, it's actually fun. So I did many ceremonies with Blue Thunder Woman in different locations, because she always ran, an Airbnb somewhere, just beautiful locations in British Columbia,
Yeah,
Half Moon
it's
Bay, on
nice
the
to be in a nice spot in nature for sure. It's
yeah. One time
nice.
it was in a yurt, Half Moon Bay, and it was pretty windy. So you always heard the water beating on the bush. So it was, it was always great. And then last September, I invited you to come. It was
I
great.
remember.
I went with a different couple from Northern California, and it was a great experience. There was a tremendous amount of laughing and dancing. It was,
Love and connection. That's what I remember you saying was
yeah,
dancing. And I was like,
it was
dancing.
great.
Yes. If people
And
are dancing,
you usually have an intention when you take ayahuasca. Even at the beginning of yoga classes, the teacher says, set your intention. So my intention was to dance until I couldn't anymore on the second night. And it was great. It was fantastic and fun.
sounds like
Sometimes
so
you
free.
go what people would call deep, and maybe you're confronting memories or trauma. Other
Right.
times it can be a lot of fun.
Just be hey, enjoy yourself and a lot of fun. Yeah,
The
I
other
would
part
I,
about with ayahuasca, and it's part of balancing act, because I didn't want to make the novel prescriptive, telling people what to believe about
right.
ayahuasca. So it's
It's
written in third person limited. So it's describing what Alona, the main character, thinks and feels, and how she sees other people. But
right.
fiction is when you can go into other characters and see it from their point of view. So it's not uh, omniscient. So I wanted to show integration, but I don't really mention the word. Integration means, after you purged, say 40 times or whatever, and you go into real world, what happens? So you go back, you're in the same stresses. You know, in the routine, we show the stress of driving, you know, in traffic jams, and we show the chaos of work. So you go back into it. So that is a test of your ability to integrate the experience. And that's really hard. So both
It is.
in balancing act and in the routine, I try to deal that. Alona has been, as you recall, Alona is a very flawed person and does a lot of
Crazy thing. She's
great
very
against
promiscuous,
rules.
etc. You
After
know, she's
the Ayahuasca experience, there's tests that she goes through that test her ability to do that. So that's the idea of it. And in the routine, the play Jordan and I have been working on most recently, it's the same thing. It's the office worker discovers a portal into another reality, and in the portal begins to learn mindfulness. But then, after one brief experience in the portal, gets taken out, goes through work, and tries to be really positive at work, but work tests is too stressful. They find even worse things happen. We have a scene where Jordan gets in a traffic accident, and it's all alone, one person. The audience totally falls in. One person in a traffic accident then gets
yeah.
pushed.
I've seen the clip. She's a
Yeah,
brilliant
it's
performance artist. She really is good.
so that's the test. That's the test of how can you integrate the experience. And then uh, the main character goes back into the portal, and it's you know, almost like an archetypal quest, like the Odyssey. You know, after the Trojan Wars. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Like an odyssey through past lives
Odysseus
or
goes on a
other dimensions or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
It's
and
kind of
deals
what
with
I
all
got
the
from it.
tests.
And it shows the lessons and how they connect and
Yeah,
how they can seem to be not anything good or why would this be a lesson, but it might become a lesson 4 or 5 lifetimes later, just you know, in the example of like Alona.
yeah,
You know, that stuff all
yeah.
starts
So,
to come
so
together.
the essence of the book is, you know, ayahuasca, then trying to integrate and find mindfulness. It's not ayahuasca isn't a magic elixir. You know, you see a lot
That's
of
a
ads on
tool.
Instagram for that, but uh, it's not it's something that you take and you have to work on. If you're interested, there's another thing, another aspect of ayahuasca I can talk about. I know a little bit about the basics of the brain physiology that explains it. One thing, well, after my first experience, well, at the time I was in a play, Winter's Tale by William Shakespeare. You've heard the phrase from Shakespeare, "Exit chased by a bear." Have you heard that? Well, I was the character that exits chased by a bear and gets killed. I'm
Okay.
in, I'm only in the first act, so I have to wait around because I come back as a
You
ghost.
gotta
And
keep coming back when it's a
I'm
new
waiting
one.
around, and I'm getting from the ayahuasca, which I just finished a few days before, and I'm getting all this insight about so many things about uh, the play, you know, about how my brain is working. I'm getting so much insight, and it wasn't during the ayahuasca experience, it's just happening afterwards. So I'm waiting around for my scene. I called my friend who I went with, and so we decided to go on a hike. I invited him on this hike near, not that far. It's, you know, we drove to it, but it's 15 minutes from where I live, and you go up, up, up.
Local.
And so usually I go up that hike. It's an hour and a half up and then an hour down. So then we get up to my usual place. And I said, "Hey, you want to go a little farther?" So we go a little farther. And I said, "You know, I don't think we're that far from the top." But we were, because you go up, 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 then you go down a bit, then you go up. So
Right. It's not a straight.
yeah,
It's
so
in the hole.
finally, you know, we found these little teeny lakes. We swam on them. Finally, we get to the top, and it's getting dark. It's nine, because here, you know, it gets dark late. So it's 9 p.m. It's
In
starting to
Vancouver.
dark, and we're up at the top of the mountain. We can't find the way down. So we find this stream, and we follow it, and we come to a waterfall. We climb down the side of the waterfall, find another one, climb down. Then we come to the top of this huge waterfall and it's dark. And there's only this little area the size of a twin bed or double bed.
So scary.
So we wait there. All the way down, he stepped on a wasp nest on one of the cliffs and couldn't just jump.
Right.
The pain.
Not really,
So then
really anywhere to go.
we slept by the waterfall. So I called Linda. I only had 1% on my phone, and it was a really old phone. So I called Linda rather than search and rescue. And I say, what's our situation? Linda called search and rescue, and we thought we're going to be here for a day. So there was a huge cliff to go up to get out. 6 hours later, we hear the rescuers. So we get rescued.
Wow.
And
were you like airlifted off were you like picked up in a helicopter, or how were you rescued?
They walked up because there was actually a trail near us that we didn't find.
Right,
So
because you guys didn't have
they dropped, what do you call those things? Safety harnesses. They dropped safety harnesses for us, and we climbed up the cliff to get
cool.
Cool.
I mean, cool story. You know, not cool getting lost, but yeah, I mean, you know, those are the things that are the spice of life.
Walking down, there were about 5 or 6 people in the rescue party. While we were walking down, they said, "We've never rescued a pair that's in such good spirits." So
That's
we were joking and everything. And then we got to the bottom, and they said, near the bottom, they said, "We have to warn you, there's 3 television news crews waiting at the bottom because at that time there was no news. There was no primaries and all this.
No, like super 24-hour news cycle. So when something happened, you know, it was
news.
news. Yeah.
I learned, getting back to the integration, you know, it was, you know, if you call getting lost, you know, in the forest and having a lot of mosquitoes and whatnot, and then really cold at night, all of that, and then being in a good mood and understanding that happened is part of the integration of ayahuasca.
And yeah, I think that's within all of us. Integration is a theme that's within all of us. Integrating, and you mentioned earlier, integrating the divine masculine and divine feminine, the balancing act that we have to. There's a lot of balancing there's a lot of balance acting that we do as souls in these human meat suits.
Yeah.
But what I was curious was, do you think that it's possible to, you know, reach? And now I want to preface this by saying that I fully support the use of plant medicine. I've used it. I still do. Not every day, of course. You know what I mean. But you know, I've done some Aya healing. But do you think that people need to go through something like that to, you know, reach that state of what you were saying, that level of integration, or some people might say the level of enlightenment or whatever? Do you think that the, you know, the plant medicine, and more particularly the ayahuasca itself?
That's a really good question, because, you know, one of the group leaders that I've worked with, what they say is, and it really sticks in my heart, what they say you need to be called to the medicine. You need to be called to it. You know, I wouldn't want to, you know, see somebody who was maybe had a lot of anxiety and didn't know what to do with their life and say, "Oh, you got to do this.
You should try this."
Yeah. You know, if I know them in a certain way, I might mention, "Well, I've tried this, and this is what it did to me." But I wouldn't. But you really have to be called, because the last ceremony I did with Blue Thunder Woman, it was really good. But what happened was, in the morning, we did the ceremony in the basement of a house. It wasn't far from here. It was the only one that wasn't in the country. And then I woke up and I was all alone in the room. Where did all the people go? But I was still in the experience. I still felt it. And I heard all these footsteps. Everybody was upstairs. They had gotten out of the experience and they were eating. So I stayed in the experience for a long, long time afterwards. So my wife and daughter had to come and pick me up, and because I couldn't draw. And
Shout out to them.
so they brought me home. And
they've
then,
been champions dealing with you
yeah,
and
then
your
it was the
ayahuasca stuff.
and so at the end of Joy Lynn's show, The Moaning Yoni, Joy Lynn sings an ayahuasca song about Mama Gaia. And so Joy Lynn was singing me that song in the backyard. But then I had other opportunities to take ayahuasca and go in the ceremony. But when I would just think of it, I would feel like I had to, like I would feel like just somebody would mention it. Or quite often when we drink the ayahuasca, we eat mint leaves right afterwards. And, I had mint
That's
plants
what I did.
growing outside my house. I'd smell the mint plants and I feel like I had to purge. So I knew it wasn't calling me. So the calling becomes something very physical. So that's
So
so
I
you
would sum that up, and just with my
have
own
the
opinion, it
calling.
would be like okay, so it feels like to me, plant medicine, but ayahuasca, of course, being, I mean, plant medicine can mean cannabis. It could mean, I guess, psilocybin mushroom. It could mean a lot of things, but
Yeah,
usually when I refer to plant medicine, I'm usually referring to ayahuasca,
yeah.
or at least,
Timing's different, but
DMT or 5-MeO DMT.
yeah,
They're different, but they're similar, and
yeah,
as you touched on earlier.
yeah. I
But
don't do
I
it.
I would say that it's like um, it can definitely, it's certainly a useful tool like that. There's no doubt about that. It might not be useful for every person at every point in their life. They may not be ready, and maybe a person might not ever be comfortable or need that tool.
Yeah,
But I think it's definitely a tool that can accelerate things as far as your perspective, your ability to practice discernment, your ability to really see. Yeah, I agree. I mean, having being someone who's utilized those things, I've benefited. I've used them as tools, and my personal development has evolved quicker due to some experiences with plant medicine. But, of course, there's some people who are going to be uncomfortable with the idea of ever using that, or at least for the time being, they'll say that, and then
yeah.
maybe they might change their mind later or whatever. I'm curious what your thoughts were, on that.
I think
There.
that the people I come in contact with that talk about ayahuasca is always a therapeutic thing. Sometimes people will use. There are a lot of psilocybin therapeutic groups, but sometimes people use psilocybin as a party drug too, and which is okay.
So it is. I have no problem with that. It could
Yeah, I
be.
think it's good. And there's also microdosing too, which is,
Highly
which is fine.
recommend it. I wish it were legal
Yeah,
in, the Western countries and everywhere. Because, I mean, let's face it, we both know that there's a lot of people in your and my country who, well, they microdose mushrooms, and they benefit from it greatly. I
yeah,
mean, I don't know how they're doing it. I can't say that I know how they're doing it, but we've heard a lot of people talk about it and have really positive effects and changes. And
yeah.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, the psilocybin is, I think, plant medicine, and so is ayahuasca, but they're quite different. But there can be hallucinations with both.
The hallucinations with ayahuasca are just on a whole nother level when people think of hallucinating, on mushrooms or whatever, and you see a little trail and you're laughing extra hard with your friends and you see the moon and it looks extra bright. I mean, that's not what ayahuasca is,
Yeah,
mushrooms. I think psilocybin mushrooms, and there's even other strains and strands of mushrooms, particularly in blends, that can actually be quite beneficial. I mean, it's not just the psilocybin hydroponic ones are the ones that you gotta get from the right field and everything. There's a lot. There's so many species of mushroom out there, and mushrooms are really interesting, and that's like its whole
yeah,
own documentary that I'm not qualified to speak on in entirety.
yeah.
But I
Where
do.
we live, it's great in the forest in the fall. There's so many mushrooms. I just take thousands of photos of them, and I just
Here. in
Um,
Florida because it's so hot, and hot and humid after of course, I've heard this, from friends or whatever. But yeah, after the rainy season, when it's really, really hot, there's always psilocybin mushrooms just growing in cow pastures everywhere because it's rain, there's cows, and it's humid, it stays humid. It's the perfect environment for that. So, I mean, it just pops out of the earth the way, because there are cows there. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. It's kind of an interesting thing. Um,
well, one
but,
thing that we didn't touch on, but did in a way, how I mentioned, I worked with my daughter Joy Lynn on these plays, but our whole family have been involved working together as a unit all
I
these
think that's awesome.
years. On daily, we work on things together, and we're involved in each other's projects quite a bit. Well, one thing that well, when I was young, really young, maybe 7 or 8, I was really taken with this movie called The Great Walendas about a circus family. Do you know the Great Walendas? They did
I've heard, I've heard
trapeze and
it, but
tightrope.
I've never
And
seen it. I remember seeing maybe like a VHS copy of it with maybe my father possessed it or something like that, but I've never seen the movie.
well, the
Must
point is,
confess.
I really loved the idea that it was a family working on a show. So
It's
I
great.
hoped that's how my life would evolve, and then it did. So when I was younger, well, I showed the mask earlier, and there's this one here in the back. So this is like your costume, and someone goes inside of this.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna say that looks like a full
I
suit.
made around 50 costumes with different styles. I had a theater company called Theater Giants. So I was looking for somebody to work with, and Linda happened to hear that I was looking for somebody to work with and called me, and we talked on the phone a few times. I said, I'm going to have auditions. I'll call you when I have auditions. And then Linda called again, and I said, and we talked for a while, and I said, you know what? I can see you're really into this. Why don't I just hire you now over the phone? So I hired Linda over the phone to be in the theater company, Theater of Giants, and to work with these masks. So that's how we met. And then Linda at the time was a ballerina in Theater of Ballet of Canada. So
Pretty goodness.
when Joanne didn't have a contract with a ballet company, Linda would work with me and I worked with other people. So we started together like that, working in Theater of Giants. And later, when I became a high school teacher, when Jordan was 5, I decided to do this dance piece, and Linda and I collaborated on the choreography with the high school students. I was the teacher. Linda was just brought in as an outside dancer. And then Joylyn was 5 at the time. And so I just brought Joylyn to work with my high school dancers on this piece that we did called Earth, Air, Fire, and Water. So as Joylyn was growing up, Joylyn was in 10 plays with me, and Linda choreographed more than 10, maybe 20 different musicals, etc. So we worked together all those years and as a family. And then later on, after Jordan graduated university, I never pictured myself continuing to work with Jordan. I thought,
Continuing.
oh, John Little will get maybe a job in a movie or work for a theater company. But then I
Move
ended
out
up,
to LA and get an agency, get an agent, and
yeah, Jordan
whatever.
was an agent for film, and is in a episode of Reginald the Vampire, season 2, episode 6.
Hey, you gotta
Uh,
start somewhere. I was
that's
once in a Walmart commercial back in the 90s.
yeah. So we always worked together as a family. So these 2 shows that we did, the Moaning Yoni and the Routine, are kind of an extension of that.
I'm I think like, and I know you live in Canada, but people can't use the concept and the term the American dream. And a lot of people are saying the American dream's kind of lost. It's over. It's very hard to obtain. But the life I just heard you describe, which I know is the life that you live, we've spoken before. But to me, to be able to live and love and laugh and work and create with the person that you love and love to create with, and somebody that you enjoy to spend time with, and then also, then all of a sudden, of course, what's the next natural step? Make a copy. Let's have a baby. Let's make a family. But then look at you now. I mean, you really doing it, like, and it doesn't matter if it's for, MGM studio or what, like, whatever.
That's right. Yeah, Steven
Pixar.
Spielberg. Yeah.
It's right. It doesn't have to be Steven Spielberg directing it. There you, thank you. You get the metaphor. It's like you are genuinely. I can sense it. I know it, and it's palpable. You're genuinely happy. You're a happy guy. You like your life. Seem to really enjoy the position that you're in. You seem to see possibilities around every corner, which is inspiring. And the other thing is your story is one of, doing what you felt was right, and what you felt was right for you, and what you felt was right for the, your family ended up being women, which is, what was right for your family, your women, your family of women that wanted to, of course, make sure. Part of everybody wants to make sure that their partner and their children are, happy and healthy and fulfilled and well-rounded.
Yeah.
But
Joy Lynn doesn't identify as a woman. Joy Lynn's non-binary.
I'm
Well,
so
that's
sorry.
okay. That's okay
Yeah,
because it's I don't know why. I thought maybe that would be another dimension to explore in the interview. If
100%. My apologies to
no,
Joy
that's
Lynn
okay. No,
first. I
no,
did not. It is a slip
no.
of the, a
Oh,
slip of the monologue.
I think it's very interesting what's happening. Yeah, in culture, it's a huge cultural change.
It's
And
very
in
interesting,
Vancouver, it's a huge part of the culture. It's
very
a
normal,
part of the culture. So, but in other places, maybe not so much.
right? I
So,
mean,
and
like
and
in
then in
Florida, where
generations, my friends, well, I have one friend who said, "Well, we're not that close anymore, but we used to." And he said, "What's it for?" In other words, people being gender fluid. What's in his response is, "What's it for?" But people have their own experience of who they are. And that as cultures evolve, there's more cultural symbols and words to express your feelings, which might remain intangible for some people who are very metaphorical. I don't know if you, I
100%.
mean,
I agree. And I don't know about you, but I personally believe in some sort of soul and reincarnation. I definitely believe in the soul, and I believe in a form of soul reincarnation. I don't think the soul dies with the body. I think the soul travels. Now, I want to throw in that I don't think it's just as simple as linear past lives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, over and over and over again. I'm not like a prison planet conspiracy theorist. I tend to believe in the concept of the soul not ever dying truly and passing on. And you know, the best argument I've personally heard, like just for me personally, as far as that kind of, we've seen a little bit of an agenda play out with the LGBTQIA plus community. Some terms have been added. There's more representation, which is okay. It's not a bad thing. I mean, I've had friends of all types throughout my life. I remember, college, they just give you a random roommate. You don't get to pick. And he was a homosexual gentleman. I had absolutely no problem with that at all. I've never been a person who's cared about that kind of thing. But when I started feeling like, why is this like mainstream like discussion all the time? It was a little weird. But on the like, just because I practice discernment, and I always look at everything through the lens of like, why are they saying a day, watching mainstream media, etc. Like, what's the intended response from me? What are they trying to make me think? Which might sound a little paranoid, etc. But like the truth of it is, it's like I never cared about any of that before. Like, people were people. Like, what does it really matter? And people who do take the time and the space in their head to like actually let it be known that they care about that and that's an issue to them is, I mean, I just think, like, come on, isn't there a better place to put your energy than to to hate on something like that? There's just a better place to put your energy. Um,
Well, one reason I brought it up, my other book, Fluid, I don't know if it looks backwards on your screen or not.
Actually, it looks perfect.
Okay. Um, it's said in ancient Greece, fluid. It refers to there's many water symbols, and that it refers to the main character. But it also has a contemporary connotation about gender fluidity because the book's about a 15-year-old girl who's being forced to marry a retired admiral. And on the way to the wedding ceremony, she escapes and ends up joining a theater company. She disguises herself as her brother, ends up joining a theater company. And in ancient Greece, all the roles, even the female roles, were played by men.
Oh man,
And she gets accepted into the theater company. So that's, I think that ends up happens in the first 30 pages or so in the book. So, but what the goal of that book was to look at a place where there is gender fluidity, because just like now, many people in the arts in ancient Greece were also gay. And so I have many gay characters in the book. And so it's looking at the idea of gender, but through the conceptual apparatus of ancient Greece. So that's what I'm doing. One of the symbols and the definitions of gender, and a lot of it is defined by, because my book's set around the time of the wars between Athens and Sparta, just after.
right.
And so Sparta, I don't know how familiar you are with it. Athens was,
I've seen the
the seat
movie
of,
300.
Athens is the seat.
Read some things in college and stuff, but I'm
The
not
idea
an
of
expert.
democracy was developed in ancient Athens around, 450 BC. There was a leader named Pericles who was very democratic. He would be like the Obama of ancient Greece.
The
Well,
Obama of the
I should bring
ancient Greece.
no, it's Florida. I don't know how people think about it, but
Man,
anyway,
this is all over the world, so
well,
it's
very
okay.
open-minded and uh,
And Tampa,
not
I
so.
will say,
Well,
is very much a blue city within a red state,
yeah. Oh yeah.
which I think is great because you get a balance, you get a group of people who understand each other and understand that we've got to live together in community. So
Yeah. Well, yeah. So back to the book. It was, um, so it was very interesting looking at uh, gender, but through the eyes of ancient Greece, and in a place where the definition of manhood, one of the definitions, which was pressuring the whole society, was so much farther than, say, the U.S. Marine Corps or Special
oh,
Forces, more macho than that. And the Trojan men they just went to visit their wives to procreate. The rest of the time they spent in barracks with their army. It was very,
right.
Indians weren't like that, but not the Trojans, the Spartans were.
They didn't get a 4-week leave
Yeah,
minimum
well,
to have
they
babies
did,
and
they, they,
stuff,
they
a
loved the
little
choice.
different.
They loved the life. If they didn't love the life, they weren't. There was social pressure to be in the army. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
I don't think it was totally enforced.
And by the time, I was old enough to be in the military, that social pressure to be in the army was kind of, I mean, of course, the army, the services have always recruited in the high schools and things like that, especially in America. I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't educated in Canada, but in America, I can say, going to school all through the 90s and everything like that in the early 2000s, there was very regular times where we had, and even from a young age, third, fourth grade, young, 7, 8 years old, um, having recruiters from the major armed services come in and talk to us about, future careers in the Army and opportunities in the Army or the Navy, the Air Force, the this, the that. Little did we know there'd be a Space Force. I think if they would have told us that, we all would have been like, really? But I'm just joking. But yeah, it was always something that was kind of, it almost seemed part of the curriculum to just be constantly reminded that, hey, you've got a spot in the military and we'd love to have you, and we'll take you and you can travel. And, they pitch it really nice. And I know a lot of people have had a great experience in the military, both in the US and in other countries. I am well traveled, and I have friends outside the US, but I also have seen some people who have really been mistreated by the military. They feel that they have been abandoned by the military. So
Can happen in any job too.
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah,
Because in the military, you go, if you spend
well,
years giving your life at risk and then you're not thanked for it, it might have a bigger impact on you than if you spent a few years, giving your time to, like, for example, me, giving your time to designing kitchens and then realizing that you probably should have made a little bit more money.
yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, things happen.
design kitchens because I
My,
have
my life
a
life
desk
wasn't in danger.
laptop. If I had a laptop, I would have had it somewhere else. But yeah, you're a connoisseur of kitchens.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the kitchens. That is true. For people who watch this show, that was my last career before I started. I mean, I'm an artist now again. I'm making music. I'm hosting events. I am doing this podcast. I'm working with other artists to, help with music, etc. So I'm happy to be living the artist life again full time, which I haven't really done since I was about 23 or 24 years old, which, actually was really hard for me. It wasn't hard for me like that I noticed, but I look at my life from like when I left the entertainment industry entirely until even considering, and I don't really consider what I'm doing now to be a return to the entertainment industry. It's a return. It's being an artist. It's a return to being true to self, seeking higher truth, seeking further connection with self, and being what I consider to be an artist. And of course, I mean, we've got to eat and get by in life. And if you can be an artist and do that, then I think you're a successful artist. Of course, you have a family and you've always been an artist, which is something that I want people to know is not easy. It takes a little bit of luck and a heck of a lot of talent and a hell of a lot of practice and hard work.
It really is hard work. How we worked on the routine. When you go say, I bought these new glasses today. I got, the exam was a couple of weeks ago. I got them, and it was so expensive. And to think how much work we have to do to pay for these glasses compared to, or you go to the massage therapist. How much work we have to do to pay for that massage. It's so, because it's not only the rehearsal and say making, if you make the costumes or whatever, writing the material, but it's the paperwork. It's to get that one Canada Council
Yeah,
apply for so many grants. I would say we might spend 40 or 50 hours, just
paperwork.
just doing the, one grant application, just getting every word perfect, and trying to fit the criterion. It's tremendous amount of work. And with, as a performing artist, every time you want a booking, it's like applying for a new job, and some of them you get and some you don't. So it's, it's really so that I became a teacher after touring, 10 or 12 years with my giant masks and worked as a teacher for 23 years, high school teacher. I got to direct 26 musicals and 10 Shakespearean plays and
Did you were
many
you were teaching drama, right? And acting
um,
and stuff. Yeah, so
uh,
still,
so
exercising.
it was really fun, and I thought I was able
Yeah.
to bring my artistic persona to the students, especially the ones who committed to being in a musical, because you become so close. You become like a family. The cast ranged anywhere from maybe 18 to 50 in one cast. Plus, you have the crew, which can be about one or two dozen people. So it's a huge group of students. And so for rehearsals, and then typically for a musical, you might have 75 hours of rehearsal. So you're so, working with such a large group of people, it's quite an experience, and it does bring you together, and you learn a lot from doing the plays, because not only are you're working with people outside, all these people together as a group, we're delving into those characters, and we're learning what makes those characters tick. And a lot of times it might be a great play like uh Midsummer Night's Dream, Love's Labor's Lost, or a musical like Hair, which dealt with the Vietnam War. Oh, the young people were, of course, born way after the Vietnam War. They're learning about
Of course.
politics, and also how you take something like the Vietnam War and the hippie movement and turn it into an artistic presentation. How do you express that era artistically? What choices do you make with your body, your voice, through the choreography, through the kind of focus you have? What kinds of things? So, I'm directing and coordinating that kind of unified vision of the piece with the students. And then, every musical has a different vision. I think on the opposite end of something like Hair, you've got Copacabana, or I directed that, or another Beauty and the Beast, is a different kind of vision. Fiddler on the Roof, there's so many different historical and psychological and perspectives that the students get to enter into and really struggle with. So you learn quite a bit. I think students learn more about history and psychology and sociology from being in a musical than they would taking all those courses. Whoops, I can't hear you. Why did my thing go neat?
Well, that's good. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes.
It's good. I wasn't talking anyway, so it's funny. It just went on mute, I guess.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, you didn't see me talking and you couldn't hear me, right? It was just for a second there. Yeah.
But then
I
your
saw
mouth
the
moving,
I saw
so
the mute button thing come up and I caught it right away.
yeah.
So I guess no worries. But what really, to be honest with you, David, what I'm most impressed by you, what most impresses me about you is, well, I don't like to say one thing, but it's a couple things. It's this. This was your first book, your first novel, right? It's freaking incredible. It's an
Thanks.
incredible ride of a novel. And anybody who watches this podcast, don't mind, David. I'm going to read just a little bit about this. I'm going to read part of it. Alana launches her self-healing journey and learns to harness her imaginary characters to become part of her healing process, viscerally and psychologically memorizing, balancing acts, Alana's quest through the landscapes of the mind, across the boundary between reality and unreality, to the heaven of empathy. Yes, act is the jester in the yurt of New Age spirituality. That actually really sums the book up well. Another piece from the back of the book is Lana stumbles upon ayahuasca, and here's Mama Gaia calling. My producer Jane, shout out to Jane. We are always talking about having downloads and just ideas and just premonitions that Mama Gaia is angry. Mother Earth's angry. Mother Earth is, she's feeling this not unappreciated, and we need to show her a little more appreciation. I mean, I'm not here to preach like agendas on politics and climate change and things like that. But I do think that we we take way too much advantage of our earth. I think we could have and may have found ways to use our earth in safer, more efficient ways. And there's a lot that happens on this earth that, as a super organism, that if Mama Gaia, Mother Earth, really were, which I believe to be, a consciousness of sorts, it would definitely have some quote unquote trauma. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Is that a little like woo woo for you, or what do you
No,
think about that?
well, there are two or three things that I can think of that relate to that. It's bringing together, say, an indigenous way of looking at nature, like Mama Gaia, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe the scientific way. And one person that I read a book called The Cosmic Serpent by Jeremy Narby, who was an anthropologist, and he went to the Amazon, to study the indigenous people and discovered ayahuasca. So over a period of about 8 years, he went back and lived with this shaman, maybe for a year at a time, and learned
That's
so
cool.
much from him. And so he wrote the book, The Cosmic Serpent. And of course, the serpent is a symbol. So during the ayahuasca ceremony, when during the discussions, in all the ceremonies I went to, we had discussions, and people often saw serpents. I saw a serpent or reptilian-like character, but it was not of this earth. It was more of maybe my imagination. So it's an iconic symbol for
And I've
ayahuasca.
almost and I've
So,
almost heard the serpent, while we
so
see it
what
as like a symbol of evil and the devil, is actually maybe not quite so. Is that true?
So I think because I think in the say in the Amazonian indigenous people's way of looking at it, they I think good and evil is a different concept. But what I wanted to talk about is the idea of dualism and monism. And I was just moving into that because
Yeah.
Narby asked the shaman. Well, the shaman had knowledge of 3,000 plant medicines in the forest. 3,000. How long could you? How long would it take to get that knowledge as a scientist and even remember everything? But he remembered it. So,
It's very
Jeremy,
diverse.
how do you know all that? And he
How do you
says,
specialize in 3,000 things? It's hard to wrap your mind
he,
around.
he said, how do you know all that? And he said, the ayahuasca taught me. So Jeremy Narby came up with this theory, and through the ayahuasca, the shaman, because he does it so much, comes in contact with his DNA, with his DNA. And within our DNA chains, most of it is inert. We don't actually use it. It's
Right.
the residue of our reptilian
Proteins.
past. It's so what Jeremy Narby's theory is that the shaman has the ability to delve into the DNA of his reptilian past. Now that's pretty far out there, and it's just a
Not far
hypothesis.
out there for here.
Yeah, so it's a
Right up the
hypothesis
show's
that,
alley.
well, a scientist would say, well, you need to test that.
Prove it.
Yeah, so
Right.
you need to show it. So,
And more so, it needs to
but
be disprovable.
yeah,
That's the hard part.
but the shaman says it, and he has the goods to prove it because he knows all these medicines. So I think that's really good. It's touching on the discussion of Mama Gaia being upset about how we treat nature, and that's trying to have that. So it's not so much. It's also about the facts. That we're saturating the atmosphere with carbon dioxide that
Yeah.
creates a blanket that holds in the heat. And by the way, that was part of Joy Lynn's grade 6 public speaking speech that went to the provincial finals in French.
Awesome.
So,
Wow. Oh, she speaks French
so
too.
we've been kind of into the climate change for a while. And but I think that,
Me too. I've followed it. I've taken different stances on it over the years, not back and forth, but just, things
yeah,
have come to
yeah,
light.
the science, and Faria, Sorry to
Yeah,
say.
and I live on the coast in Florida, so it's like kind of relevant.
The ocean temperature is hotter than ever by a lot.
The
And
Gulf of Mexico is not refreshing. It's
yeah, it's hot. And that's what generates hurricanes. And, so far, I don't think there have been any this season, but it's just beginning.
we're early in the season. Yeah,
Yeah.
not yet.
Yeah, I was in a hurricane when I was a kid in Florida.
Yeah, they can be a little scary, but I live in the Tampa Bay area, which,
There
for
was
whatever reason we
right at the
tend
coast recently. Yeah.
yeah, we tend to be pretty lucky though as far as not getting like direct hits. Like I mean, like Katrina, for example, in '04, that was a direct hit on New Orleans. Um,
In a way, maybe it's the location because they tend to travel from south to north, and
it's
because
I think
there's
it's the cur
there's a chance maybe it'll go into the Everglades and kind of get a bit blacked out.
Yeah, it tends to hit some part of land before it
Or
rolls up into Tampa Bay
or if
and
you're in
hit us.
Orleans or uh, it's just Pensacola, you're just kind of more on the north-south directory
But
vector.
it affects everything, because the news and all that, they try to really hype the things up. And then sometimes, of course, there really is legitimate concern. So even if you're not, living in like a flood zone and you might know that you're probably going to be okay, it affects
You don't
things.
live in
And
a zone, do you? How many
what's
feet?
that?
How many feet above sea level are you?
Not very many. I mean, I probably could say in the single digits, maybe, somewhere between 10 and 20 at tops.
10
But
and 20? That's not bad for Florida.
yeah, I mean, there, like literally, yeah, there's
Yeah,
spots where you can get a little higher up than others.
I think we're seven where we live. We're 700 um, meters from the ocean. It's an inlet, so it's not big waves or anything, but it's an inlet of the Pacific. So we're 700 or 800 meters from that. And I'd say